Sentire Media.
This episode is brought to you by the Smart Move Italy app, your free tool for planning, moving, and thriving in Italy. Download it today on iOS and Android. Welcome back to A New Life in Italy. I'm Samantha Wilson, and today is our final episode of this season. And I thought it would be a perfect moment to look back, reflect a little, and revisit some of those questions that really shaped the season. This year, you showed up with real concerns, real dreams, and real stories. From visas to your first rental contract, from residency to what happens when the questura changes your appointment date. We covered a lot. And some questions, well, they hit a nerve. They got shared, they got replayed, and saved more than anything else. So today we're bringing back those highlights. The questions that made people say, wow, I didn't know that. The ones that saved people time, that saved people money, or helped them finally take that next step. And before we press play on those, let me just say thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your research, part of your dreaming, and in so many cases, part of your actual move to Italy. That's an honor that I don't take lightly. Your messages, your voice notes, your emails, and your stories, they shape this show. And that leads us to next season, because season 4 is going to be something special. We're taking you deeper into life in Italy, not just how to arrive, but how to live well once you're here. We'll be bringing back experts, but with a twist, because after the mic turns off, there are conversations that happen behind the scenes, stories, opinions, things they didn't want to say publicly. And next season, we are sharing more of that, more real talk. We're opening the door just a little wider. We'll also have special episodes from real people currently navigating their move. We'll have updates on previous callers. And yes, we will dig into some of those big Italy debates that everyone whispers about, but nobody says out loud. And I'm really excited about that. So as we wrap, I want to wish you the happiest holiday season, whether you're spending it planning your move, already packing boxes, or are already here in Italy, learning how to order that coffee correctly. And yes, the barista will judge you just a little bit. Know that you are not alone in this. We'll be back with a brand new episode and season 4 on January the 14th, 2026. Meanwhile, enjoy today's show, save this episode that speaks to you, share them with someone you know who has Italy in their heart, and stay connected with me through Instagram or on our newsletter, Per Te. This is Samantha Wilson signing off for this season. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your messages, and thank you for dreaming big. Italy really is waiting for you. I'll see you in January. I'm Samantha Wilson, Chief Dreammaker at smartmoveitaly.com, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show where each week I take you behind the scenes of what it's really like to move to Italy, introduce you to some fascinating people, answer your questions, and show you how starting a new life in Bel Paese is possible for you. Is it really cheaper to live in southern Italy? And the answer is yes, it is cheaper to live in southern Italy in everything, buying houses, renting property, the food, everything that you do in the south is at a lower price. But as I said earlier, it does come with negatives. You get what you pay for. And in the south, there isn't a lot of services, or there are services, but they're not as developed as they might be in the north, because there's simply just not as many people down there. The tax, income tax brackets are lower, so therefore the money isn't funneled back into the southern regions. So there's reasons that things are a little bit cheaper, or there's less money down there. But certainly if you are on a budget, or you want to live, or you like to live more frugally, definitely move to the south, or look at everything south of Abruzzo. So anything south of Abruzzo, you will get better pricing. But please be mindful that coming with those lower prices also comes with a lack of services and maybe not as comfortable of a life as what you would have in the north. Can I live in Italy on 2,000 euros a month? Yes, absolutely you can. And this is, this number might be changing a little bit in the last few years because things are progressively getting more expensive, as they are all over the world. But if you're careful, you can certainly live on 2,000 euros a month in most parts of Italy. after maybe you've paid your rent, or if you're living in a very small place with a very low rent. Living in a city, including rent, at $2,000 a month is a bit of a push for central Italy, and obviously probably not enough for northern Italy. But certainly in the south, $2,000 a month, including your rent and your food and your wine and all of your entertainment, is definitely doable. What is the biggest surprise expense when moving to Italy? Well, this depends on how much preparation people take, but my experience has been that most people are mostly surprised at the cost of utilities and maybe the cost of some of the more conveniences that we might be used to in North America. So I already spoke about in this podcast about the cost of heating, but it can be really surprising in some of the homes. And I know when we first moved here in our farmhouse, I think before we changed from gas heating, which was GPL because it was out like propane because it was out in the country, and we changed to a big pellet heating system because it was much more affordable later. And that's because our first year's bill was over 5,000 euros for the first month and a half of winter. So that was a super huge shock. But we learned that there's ways that you can save on your heating, even just by changing your heating system can save significantly. In fact, when we changed our system over, our heating went from, I think the full winter season that year was around $7,000. And then it went down to just over 1,000 euros. So a massive, massive savings by changing from GPL to a pellet system. So there's things you can do about it. So heating certainly is a big surprise. But the other thing I think that people are super surprised about is how inexpensive it is really to do the things that you love to do, and probably the things that made you move to Italy. Living here can be like living in a museum. If you're living in Florence, it's like an outdoor free museum. Everywhere you look is history, and most of the places that you live or you want to go see, if you live here, you can get in for free on weekends or one Sunday a month. For example, in Florence, you can go to a lot of the museums for free. But all of the great things like, art and food and entertainment and festivals, these are all free to go to. So I think that people don't realize that the amount of money they spend to keep themselves entertained in their home country is significant. And what you do not spend here is a big shock to them, how they can really be entertained and enjoy their lifestyle with very, very little money. I've seen some amazing properties online, but how do I know if they're actually available for sale before I plan my buying trip? Well, it's about doing that background that I spoke about in this episode, in this podcast. The first thing you need to do is contact your agent, or I guess you could also contact the listing agent if you have the ability to do that, and ask some questions. The main questions to ask about the property, of course. Number one, is it still available? And ask for further details, like where is it? What is the address? How long has it been for sale for? Any other more details that hopefully you'll be able to use to find the property on Google Maps or Google Earth, because this is a great way to really see where the property is. I can tell you, though, that often an agency will not tell you the address of the property. And it isn't because they're being sneaky and don't want you to know. It's because they don't want other agents to know. In Italy, because there's no MLS and because there's very little exclusivity, often when agents get a listing, they don't want to tell all the other agents out there that they have this owner wants to sell, because the other agents will knock on the door and try to get the listing as well. So usually they hide the address from the buyers until they can verify that you really are a buyer. So sometimes you have to look at the listing, maybe look at the pictures in the listing, see if you can kind of recognize the location, or just even in the description, it can say it's, 1 or 2 kilometers from the main town or the city. So you can try using Google Earth and see if you can find the property. If I find a house I love, how quickly do I need to make an offer? Can I take time to think about it, or will I risk losing it? Well, this is a good question. I think that the best thing to do is don't start seriously looking until you're ready to buy. So the question you need to ask yourself is, if I walked in and I found the property of my dreams tomorrow, am I ready to buy it? Do I have the money available? Can I make an offer? Can I put a deposit down? So if your answer is yes, that means you're ready to buy. So when you find a property that you love, then you can start thinking seriously about how quickly you want to move forward. It is always a good idea if you find something that you like to express immediately with your agent that, yeah, this is the one. I love this one. We need more details. And then in Italy, what often happens is your agent will contact the seller's agent and tell them, hey, my client is very interested in making an offer, potentially in this property. We need to discuss and see where we're at, see what more details are about this property. And in most cases, the other agent, the seller's agent, if they get phone calls from other people, will just say, hey, I'm already talking to somebody. We're probably going into an offer, so I'll call you back once I know for sure. And they'll give you a very short time frame, a few days, maybe a week, maybe, to make a decision, and then they'll open up the property again. So it's quite nice that way. Now, in some cases in cities where there's lots of competition and very few properties, you'll have to act a little faster, especially if you have a property that's very well priced in a very popular area. Your agent will be able to guide you. And again, if you have an agent working on your behalf, they're not going to lie to you. They're not going to try to pressure you into urgency. They'll be honest with you and say, hey, look, this is a really good property. There's lots of people seeing it now. If you're ready to move, why don't we start with an offer and see where we go? That's the best course of action. What if I fall in love with a house, but it needs work? How do I figure out the cost of renovations before I buy? Well, this is a great question because I think this is the dream as well from a lot of people. And that's mostly because of these movies. You know, they find something that's a ruin or a real mess and they need to renovate it. So it's totally possible. And yes, you can get some great deals and add value to it by renovating and have a great property and a great investment in the future. But it's a little bit complicated in Italy. And depending on where you're buying, there could be some really serious renovations or restrictions, to renovations that you need to be aware of. So before you buy a property, you should always have it checked by a geometra or even an architect if you want some major things done. To give you a survey of the property, just so you can understand what can and cannot be done, and also roughly how much it will cost to do the works that you're looking for. And the other nice thing is when you have a local geometra that's doing that inspection, or an architect, they know that hopefully if you do the work, you buy the house and do the work, that you may come back to them to actually do the work and hire them to do the job. So that's a really good way also of finding somebody to do the work and help you later on. But if you've fallen in love and you need some work on the house, then just make sure you have the inspections in advance so you know exactly what you're getting into. I've heard that if you have a UK driver's license, that you can switch to an Italian driver's license without having to take the Italian exam. And I'm happy to tell you, yes, this is true. If you have a UK driver's license that was issued in the United Kingdom, and I don't mean converted from another country's license into UK, I mean I took a test through the UK testing system and have a UK driver's license, then yes, this driver's license can be exchanged here in Italy without the need for a driver's exam, no written, no driving, no nothing, which is a really good thing. In fact, it was, I think, the last thing that they had negotiated on the withdrawal agreement. Of course, if you're a European citizen, the same thing goes. If you have an EU driver's license, you can convert this to an Italian one without having to take the exam. We are thinking about the investor visa. Do we have to live in Italy full time? Well, I have great news for you because back in 2021, the investor visa had made some changes, some major changes to it. There were 3. And one of those changes were that they removed the requirement that you had to spend a specific amount of time in Italy to keep the permesso di soggiorno, which is your permit of stay, attached to the investor visa. So what that means is now the investor visa, you do not have to stay here for any minimum amount of time in Italy to maintain the permit. And your permit, by the way, for the investor visa is for 2 years, renewable for another 3 years, and you can continue to renew it as long as you maintain the investment. Don't change it in any way. And there's no requirement for you or your family to have to stay or live here for any period of time. What you do need to be mindful of is that you are not in Italy for more than 183 days in a calendar year, because this will trigger taxable status in de facto. So you just need to be careful. If you do not want to take your residency in Italy, you don't want to move here full time, just make sure you don't stay for more than 183 days in a year. But you can stay for 1 day if you like. Doesn't matter. What is the minimum investment for the investor visa for Italy? And can I change my mind? All right. So the changes that I had talked about earlier in the last question, one of the other ones, the second thing that changed was the amounts of the investment. It used to be 1 million euros in an Italian company or 500,000 euros in an Italian innovative startup. And they reduced that in half to 500,000 and 250,000 in an innovative startup. So 500,000 in shares or 250 in an innovative startup. And this actually has opened up the doors to a lot of people who can find a way to manage the 250 into the Italian innovative startup. Now, the thing to remember is that you do not make this investment until you actually get your visa and arrive in Italy. In fact, you have 3 months from the date of arrival in Italy with your visa to make the investment. If you decide not to proceed after you've arrived with your visa, you just won't get your permit. You won't get fined. There is no penalty. Of course, the people you have committed to invest in will be super angry, and there might be some kind of contractual problems that you'll have to deal with. But for the visa itself, you do not have to make that investment. You can just change your mind and leave. So this is a really nice, almost a cooling off period that you can use. Now, most people follow through with it because that was their plan from the beginning, but you don't have to. And then the other thing to remember is that when you make the investment, you do not have to, even though your permit is good for 2 years and then 3 years, and then you can continue to renew it, it doesn't mean you have to commit to that investment for that period of time. You can change your mind and sell your shares at any point, but knowing as soon as you do that, you will lose the permesso di soggiorno. If you're investing in an innovative startup, sometimes you'll have an agreement with that startup that you're not permitted to sell your shares for a certain period of time because, of course, a startup has to rely on that money because they're essentially a startup and they need these funds. So depending on your situation, most cases for the visa itself or for the permit, you're allowed to leave at any time, but you might have a second agreement with your investment. How do I know if I'm getting a good deal when buying property in Italy, especially as a foreigner who doesn't speak the language or understand the market? Oh, what a great question. I actually think this is a good question no matter where you are in the world and you're buying, whether you're a foreigner or not. Having to know, what the market value is for what you're paying for is always an important question. In Italy, the problem is that we can't get, previous sales data as easily as you can in your home country. So your realtor can't just go in, pull up the database and tell you comparables in your area, what the neighbor's house sold for last year or 10 years or 100 years ago here. But, and that's probably the reason, is that properties don't flip as quickly as they do in other countries. And also we just don't have this big MLS database here. Now, property purchase prices are registered, and sometimes what you can do is you can ask in the documentation of the property that you're going to buy, or you've already have an offer on. Part of the documentation can be the deed that the seller, the purchase deed that the seller had when they bought the property. And sometimes on there, of course, if they haven't blacked it out, you can see what they paid for it. But pretty much what you have to do is really rely on your agent, making sure that they represent you and not the seller, of course. So having an independent agent, having if it's a big property, very expensive, sometimes a property lawyer is a good idea as well, because they will have a better idea based on, the type of the property and the market value per square meter and the condition of the property to give you a really good valuation of how much that property should be. But it does take a lot of due diligence. It does take some trust, and you really need to understand the market, or at least speak to somebody who knows the market. And then I think the age-old thing is, something is as worth as someone's willing to pay for it. So you always also have to not worry so much about being ripped off as it is. Is this property a good property? Is it safe? Is it, legal? And is it a price that you can afford, and do you love it? I think that's what at the end of the day, that's what you should be thinking about. What's the deal with getting documents apostilled and translated? Who does it? And how do I know what needs to be done for Italy? Really great question. And it's often confused what an apostille is. So first thing to think about is that if you have a non-Italian language document, an English document, that you need to use for legal purposes in Italy, obviously it needs to be translated into Italian. And in some cases, those translations can be simple, meaning not certified and not sworn to in court or anything, just simply translated. And then sometimes they need to be officially translated, so they have to have a certified translator. And then they have to be apostille, which is like a legalization, a notarization for a document outside of Italy. So if you are, for example, applying for citizenship, you will need to have your marriage certificate translated and legalized, translated and apostille. And where do you have this done? Well, you have it done in the state. If you're in the U.S., you have it done in the state that issued that marriage certificate. So wherever your document was issued, you get it apostilled in that state. Canada has a different process, so you can Google apostille in Canada, and it'll tell you exactly how to send it. Same thing with Australia, same thing with the UK. These are all countries that are part of The Hague and use the apostille. If your country is not part of The Hague and you do not have the apostille process, then what you do is you take the document and you legalize it through the Italian consulate in the country that you're living in. And who needs or what kind of documents? How do you know which ones need to be done? Well, whatever you're applying for, whether it's a visa or citizenship, you will see a list of documents on the consulate that you need, and those will be, whatever ones need to be apostilled and translated will be indicated on that list. It should be anyway. But typically any vital records you need to have translated and apostilled, certainly for citizenship, not always for visas, but definitely for citizenship. Can I buy a property in Italy if I do not live there full time? Yes, absolutely you can. Now, one thing you have to think about is where you're from, because some countries do not have reciprocity, meaning that if an Italian cannot buy a property in that country, then that country's nation cannot buy a property in Italy. And I am talking to you Canadians out there right now, because there is a ban on foreigners buying property in Canada, which means that Canadians cannot buy property in Italy, cannot buy a second home in Italy. So if you do not live here full time, you are not a permanent resident or just a resident of Italy, and you're Canadian, you will not be able to buy a house. Now, that restriction is hopefully being lifted in January of 2027. So there's still time to wait. But if you're Canadian, you can buy if you move here and you live here first, and then you can buy. There is also a problem with reciprocity with Australia, which has been in place for quite a long time. But there are some workarounds with Australia. There are not workarounds for Canada yet. So if you're from other countries, then usually, yes, it's not a problem at all. How long does the whole process usually take? Well, it kind of depends on how quickly you find your property that you love, your search criteria. If, let's just say, from the time that you find the property that you love, it can take anywhere between 2 to 6 months to actually close on the deal. So we won't talk about how long it takes to find a place, because that is variable. But as soon as you do find the place you like, from the time you start the negotiations to the time you have the keys in hand, typically 2 to 6 months. Do I really need a lawyer? Well, in short, yes, you do, but not for every single property. A property lawyer in Italy is a very valuable resource here. If you're buying very expensive property or complex property or farmland or things that are just a little off, or if you're buying privately, yes, absolutely 100%, you need to have a property lawyer help you along the process to make sure everything is buttoned down and legal. Now, if you're buying through a trusted agency and, they know what they're doing and they're experienced and it's a fairly simple process, most of the time, no, you don't need a property lawyer. But in some cases, you'll need both. You'll need an agent that helps you find the property, and you'll need a property lawyer. And that means that you're going to pay commission to the agent, usually about 4%. And then you'll also pay the property lawyer. And their fees vary depending on the price of the property. But it's good to get an estimate or a quote. Now, our favorite property lawyer, of course, is Alessandro Clemente from Clemente Law Firm. And I'll put his link in our show notes so that if you need to contact him, feel free. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about visas, citizenship, property, and, well, really anything about moving to Italy that you would like me to answer in an upcoming episode, please feel free to send us a voicemail at our website at smartmoveitaly.com/podcast, or just click on the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and remember, you can find all of the resources and the links to the people and the places that I mentioned in this episode inside the show notes. Ciao for now. New Life in Italy podcast is a production of Sentire Media, created and hosted by me, Samantha Wilson. Production by London Nero, and with special thanks to Ali Frothingham, Sofia Pisana, and the entire team at Sentire. Follow A New Life in Italy wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you're thinking of moving to Italy, whether full-time, part-time, or for a lifetime, come and see me over at smartmoveitaly.com and we'll help you get here and start living your best life. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please rate and leave a review. It's much appreciated. I can't wait to meet up with you again next week, same time, same place. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
This episode is brought to you by the Smart Move Italy app, your free tool for planning, moving, and thriving in Italy. Download it today on iOS and Android. Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy, and we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.